Beautiful mind. Because of English. Yeah, if you speak with English accent, no matter what you say, you already sound good. That's right. That's right. That if Biden would have an English accent, he wouldn't have had such a problem. Okay. Zog the Heilige Mishnah. Hanoider min habayis. One. Oh, thank you. Oh, by the way, today is the Yortzeit of the Raven. Can you imagine? Hanoider min habayis. Someone who makes a neder, I'm not going to have hano from the bayis. Mutter ba'aliyah, you're allowed to have hano from the second floor. Diver Rav Meir. That is the shita of Rav Meir. But the Chachamim Maimrim aliyah b'chlal habayis. The second floor is included in what someone means when someone says bayis. Hanoider min aliyah. But what if someone says, I'm only not going to have hano from the aliyah? Then mutter b'bayis. Then he's allowed to have hano from the bayis. Let's see the hilig around. Min habayis mutter b'aliyah. Rav Meir aliyah lesa b'chlal bayis. Rabbanan palagalei. The Rabbanan argued the sphere lahu the aliyah b'chlal bayis, and aliyah is considered the house. Miu moidu the hanoidu min aliyah mutter b'bayis. For sure, when someone says aliyah, he does not mean bayis. Now, what a bayis is, it involves more than just an aliyah. Like for instance, what if it's not daled al daled, a place that wouldn't be mechuyev mezuzah? To most poskim hold, that's not a bayis either. When someone says a bayis, he means something that's considered a normal bayis. So it's negeya in hilchos sukkah, it's negeya in hilchos mezuzah, but it's also relevant over here what's called a bayis. Zok the Gemara man tana bebayis. It says in the parsha of Nedarim, ki savoyu al eretz Canaan asher ani noisen lachem lachuzah v'nesati neged tziras beveis eretz achuzaschem. So the Tana learns from beveis eretz achuzaschem two limudim. Number one is l'rabis etz hayitzia, that not only if the nega is found in the actual walls of the house, but if it's found in the yitzia, it would also be a nega. Now, we'll first discuss what a yitzia is, and then we'll discuss what taka is the halacha if you find a nega in a yitzia. So I saw different pshatim in a yitzia. I saw one pshat that it's like a lean-to against your house, like a place where someone might store wood. I saw it could be referring to a loft where there's a second story that's only covering part of the first story. But in either case, the halacha is that a nega found in a yitzia, we paskin halacha l'maisa, is not a nega. So because of that, there are many Rishonim who changed the girsa from yitzia to tzviya. So let's see the Ran inside. Beveis d'chsiv v'nigdei batim tahainu beveitz eretz achuzaschem. The Rabbi says yitzia kachi agirsa b'neschoyis. V'armu b'toisvis. Toisvis says the loy garsinan loy. We're not going to be gosh yitzia. The b'tois kahanim tanya ibcha. B'kiris habayis v'loy b'kiris hayitzia. In fact, a nega found in the walls of a yitzia would not be b'tama b'nega. So that's not what this pasuk of beveis could possibly be masber. Ulefichach, because of her of Moshe Bar Shnir, which is a very unusual name for a Rishon, of Moshe Bar Shnir, the loy garsinin hacha yitzia. We don't darshan, we don't not gers here yitzia, because in fact the yitzia will not be tamei b'tumas nedarim, ela tzavua, kloimar, bayis tzavua b'minit tzavayim. What if your walls are not painted white? They're painted in a different rainbow of colors. The itzrich l'rebuye. What's the chiddush that you can have a nega in a home that's not white? You would have had a havmina to learn that there's no such thing as a nega in a colored surface, just like by nege begodim, chatzvuim einan matamen begodim. A colored shirt will not become tamei with a nega. Tichsiv tzemer upishtim. Ma pishtim shaloi nishtanu av tzemer shaloi nishtana. It didn't change from its original state, its original color. Kamashlan ribuya, that even though you have walls that are painted colorful colors, nevertheless they're still matama b'negoyim. This would have been good to know when someone in yeshiva wore a non-white shirt, then Shich says, why don't you wear a white shirt? You say, what do you mean? There's a higher level of tahira. It's not even susceptible to nigei begadim. I don't know. I'm not sure. I hear it. It's the same part of the overall superstructure, so to speak. In economy, it's a good shot. I don't know.
It's a loft. A loft is a building?
No, a loft is a second floor that doesn't completely go up. You know where you would see a loft? No. I mean, it's open. It opens it up like Shmuel Gross's Furimstieg, where there's like a second floor, like a balcony in one room.
Yeah.
That's what a loft is. So the Yamshel Shloimeh actually speaks about the origin of names, and he talks about the origin of the name Shner. Where does the name Shner come from? So he says the name Shner comes from, the Rav spoke to Shabbos. He was speaking about when you name a child, who gets the name, right? The Rav spoke this week. He said over on the Sat Mereva, right? So there was once two families, and they didn't know what to name this boy. One of them had a grandfather, Uri, who they wanted to name after, and the other one had a grandfather, Meir, who they wanted to name after. Both mean licht. So they decided to name him Shnei Or, two lichts. The Uri from one side and the Meir from the other side. That's what the Yamshel Shloimeh says the name Shner comes from. So that's why probably the name Shner is associated with an Ishalim, because it was clearly someone who made up a new name just for the sake of peace, so they should satisfy both families. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter.
Well, that's good.
By the Lakewooders, they have Shner is a big name, but Lakewood Shner Kotler. But I don't think it's the same Shner. I think it's two Shners. It's Shnei Shners. I think. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Dr. Gemara weiter. Rab Chisda, Zok Rab Chisda, Rab Meiri. This would have to be Rab Meir. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the second half. The Beveis L'Rabbis Yitzia, the Beveis L'Rabbis Aliyah. I'm not sure how you learn two things from Beveis, but it's also being Marba and Aliyah, which means if there will be a nega found on the second floor of a house, that's also Matama Benigay Batim. Rab Chisda, Rab Meiri. This would have to be Rab Meir. I'm sorry? The Rabbanon, if you want to say it's going to go to Rabbanon, Ha'ami Rabbanon, Aliyah Bichlal Habayis. Lamali Kra Beveis L'Rebuya. According to the Rabbanon, by default, the Aliyah is part of the house. Why do I need a special pasuk to tell me to include the Aliyah? Why would I not include the Aliyah? By default, it's part of the house. So therefore, Rab Chisda wants to suggest that this brisa that we just quoted is only consistent with Rab Meir of our Mishnah. But Abai argues, Abai Amar, Afilu Tema Rabbanon. You could even say that this brisa is following the Rabbanon. So why do I need a pasuk by Negoyim if by default an Aliyah is always considered a house? So Gemara Boy Kra, you still need a pasuk. So it connects the bias to the eretz. The mechaber ba'ara shmei bias, a house that's connected to the ground, or the portion of the house that's connected to the ground, which would mean the main level. That's called a bias. Aliyah, but the second story hala mechaber ba'ara. So normally, an aliyah is included in the word bias, but we need more than a bias for nega. It has to be beveis eretz. It has to be a house that's connected to the ground. So therefore, I would have thought that maybe the aliyah is not susceptible to negoim. Kamash Malon beveis that it is.
But what makes the fifth foot, second yard?
Because it says base, it doesn't say wall. So you're saying even in one house, split it in half. So it could be you don't split a house in half. It says beveis, right? Beveis eretz ksiv kolemar bayis hamachubur la'aretz. Zog to Gemara weiter. Kaman Nazla. How about this next brisa? Or it's not even a brisa. It's a member in the Gemara. Kaman Nazla. According to who would this following member be consistent with? Hadu Amar Abhuna Barchia Mishmei Du'ula. Someone was selling his house, so he advertised to the seller, Bayis Bevesi ani moicher lach. A house in my house, I'm selling you. So if that was the deal that was signed, mar'eyu aliyah. Now, if anyone lives in Brooklyn, I remember my friend who lived in Brooklyn told me that if you live in Borough Park, for instance, most of the houses are 3 stories. There's an apartment on the main level, on the second level, and on the third level. The owner of the house always lives on the second level, he told me. Why? Because the first level is right at the street. You don't want break-ins. The second level is one street up. It's not right on the street. And the third floor is already up too high. So generally speaking, he told me they'll only live on the second level because that's where it's most comfortable. Stims?
The owners usually have the whole house.
Well, that's nowadays. I'm talking about when we were growing up when people weren't so fancy yet.
Not that old house, you lived in the first floor, once you had the basement also.
I hear.
That's what you need.
Okay, so what Rav Huna says differently. He says when you say base in the Moichelach, mar'eyu aliyah, I can make him go into the aliyah, or maybe even the third floor. In other words, since I didn't specify, we say yad moicher al elyoina, yad balashtar al tachtoina. You can't prove that I mean anything other than that. Therefore, I can push you up to the aliyah. Taima de amerlei bayis shebebesi ani moichelach. The reason why you can say what you meant in your sale contract is the aliyah. That's because you didn't just say base bias ani moichelach. You said bias shebebesi. Avo bias stam. What if you just said bias ani moichelach? Einoi mar'eyu aliyah. You wouldn't be able to say you must take the aliyah. Lema Rab Meir. So this also seems to be only consistent with Rab Meir. And if it's only consistent with Rab Meir, that's why it's because you said the extra bias shebebesi. According to the Rabbanan, even if you said bias, you could give him the aliyah because bias by definition means the aliyah. And here you don't have the extra pasuk of a vase eretz. Zoktimo, you don't have a raya. Afilu temer Rabbanan. My aliyah mu'ul shebevatim. Turn the whole member around. When it says marei aliyah, it doesn't mean you could show him an inferior dwelling place, such as the second floor. Fakert. This is not this member. Rav Huna is not discussing the rights of the moicher to give an inferior dwelling. It's actually spotlighting the koyach of the lekeach, the strength of the lekeach, that the moicher is mechuyev to sell him the best part of the house. And that's what the Rabbanan, that's how the Rabbanan will understand. I shouldn't say that's how the Rabbanan, the Tana, will understand Rav Huna bar Chia's memra. Rav Huna bar Chia could have even been saying the memra according to the Rabbanan, and maybe the memra doesn't say that the moicher could push lekech to an inferior apartment, rather the opposite. Lekech could demand from the moicher a superior apartment because of the extra word of bias shebebesi. Okay, gewaltig. But you see, there's a huge nafkamina lahalocha on the rights of a seller and a buyer, depending on whether Rav Huna bar Chia was referring to the Rabbanon, which makes the lakeach with the upper hand that he gets the best apartment, versus the moicher. So it seems from our Gemara that the conclusion of the Gemara is that we're learning Rav Huna bar Chia is going into Rabbanon. And in such a situation where someone sold by Shabbat, Lekech could demand the best apartment there. The Ram brings down that there's another sugya that's mashma. The conclusion is only going to Rav Huna. Let's see what the Ram says. Leimer Merhi v'leRabbanon. The Rabbanon af al gav deloy omer bias bevesi. He didn't use this extra lashon. He just said generic. El bias ani moichelach. According to Rav Meir, mar eyu aliyah. Anyway, you could sell him the aliyah. The other two aliyah b'chlal bias, because the word bias doesn't mean aliyah according to Reb Meir. And for the Gemara, my aliyah mulusha b'batim v'hachi kamar mar'eyu aliyah al karchach shel moicher. Even though the moicher wouldn't want to give him the best property there, bias shebabatim has that connotation according to the Rabbanan. The kivin to amalei bias bevesi tzarich liver loy hamu'ula. The dafka damar bias bevesi, amar bias tam loy elamareyu gerua. He can get away with the lowest valued apartment there. So the Ram goes through a whole shtickle that in another sugya it's mashma that the maskana is like Rav Huna. So therefore, So therefore, he says v'yachi. He concludes it there. That I don't want to go through the whole. So it's a little complicated. But v'yachi, efshir the kaim along Reb Meir could be held like Reb Meir. So it's actually a shayla if he holds like Reb Meir or not. Reb Meir holds that the aliyah is not included in the bias. So going according to Reb Meir would be a little bit of a kula, because if you are annoyed from a bias, you're still allowed to use the aliyah. By the Gemara concluding like the Rabbanon, it's mashma we pass on to Rabbanon, it should be a chumrah, but the Ran says since another sugya seems to indicate that we go according to Reb Meir, could be mekel according to Reb Meir. But the Rabbanon argues and he holds l'chumrah. Okay, now we're going to get up to another sugya about beds. Hanoidir ben amita. Someone said, I'm not going to have ano from amita. I can't even imagine saying something like that. Although when we had our arts inspection in Philadelphia, arts is an organization, you for sure know what arts is. Arts is an organization that in order for colleges to be accredited, they have to meet some type of standard. But the normal secular standards won't really apply to a typical yeshiva. They couldn't possibly assess it. So the former schools got together and made their own organization to accredit colleges so that they could be considered a college to get funding from the government. And the name of the organization is called ARTS, AARTS. I don't know what it stands for. So basically, every year, a group of Rosh Yeshivas inspect one yeshiva. So one year, Philadelphia got audited by ARTS. So the head of the audit team was a Rabbi Chaim Levine from Tel Chicago. And I remember he sat into the Rosh Yeshiva Shir and he interviewed Bachami. He wanted to really do a thorough examination of the yeshiva. So he interviewed me. And he told me, when I told him my Rav was Rabbi Lowy, he told me, I learned in yeshiva with Rabbi Lowy in Telz, and I can tell you that Rabbi Lowy did not sleep in his bed the entire Chodesh Elul. That's what he told me. The entire Chodesh Elul, Rabbi Lowy did not sleep in his bed. He didn't come to his room. So Rabbi Lowy could have been Nedarim and Amita. Anybody else can't be Nedarim and Amita. Nedarim and Amita, Mutter b'dargish, she's allowed to sleep in a dargish. There's going to be a lot of controversy in the Gemara what a dargish is. But I'm at least going to set down what the two options are. Dargish could just mean a decorative ceremonial bed that's not used to sleep on. Rather, it's just used because it's good mazel. You have an extra bed in the room. It shows that there's rafchus, but there's other explanations of what its symbolic nature is. Or dargish could also be referring to a cot. There are traveling salespeople who used to bring along a mobile bed with them. So it was a bed that was easily disassembled and reassembled. So the Gemara at the beginning, throughout the sugya, is going to assume that it's a full-size bed, but it's a ceremonial bed. It's not a cot. It's a bed that's just used to show rafchas. So Anoidim and Amita, Mutter b'dargish, Diver Reb Meir. That's what Reb Meir holds. So Reb Meir holds, when someone says Mita, he doesn't refer to a dargish. The Chachamim Mairim, dargish b'chlal. Mita also includes dargish. Dargish b'chlal Mita. But Hanoidim and a dargish, Mutter b'mita. Surely, if someone asks himself from having enough from a dargish, he's for sure allowed to have it all from a bed. Okay, like all cows are animals, but not all animals are cows. So a dargish is a type of bed at best. Okay, let's see what the Ran says on it. Dargish and Meparish b'Gemara. So that's what the Ran tells us, and in fact, there's going to be a lot of talk about it now. My dargish. What is a dargish? Omar Ula Arsa de Gata. It's an Arsa de Gata. Let's see how the Ran translates Arsa de Gata. Now, Hagen Hoyu, they used to fear Latzia Mita Lamasal Abayis. They would just set a bed, but all it did was for the mazel of the house. Gada is mazel. V'doimeloi b'soif perik l'mei sheyotzis God gedius nukloi. The problem that the Achronim discuss is this is like superstition. It's nachash, and we're not allowed to do that. So that's why there's a lot of discussion in the Achronim precisely how it works. I'm sorry? So the Mashal brings down that what it was is every house has a malach that's it's the Sari Shalbais. Every house has a malach that's supposed to I'll covered to show that we make place for the Rebbeinu Shloim's kedusha in our house, and this malach we put a bed there. So it's not nichush, right? Like exactly. Some of them actually compare it to the Kisa Shalio, precisely that. So it's not nichush; it's showing respect to the Rebbeinu Shloim, and they felt that would bring good fortune. Okay, gewaltig. It was a bed that wasn't used, so it was very much like a Hungarian home. You have a beautiful living room set, but don't you dare sit on that couch. It comes from that, yeah. It comes from that. I remember we had a living room in our house. It was a beautiful living room, but heaven helped you if you lived in it. What's that? Oh, it's El Reis Levad. There was a story where Bachram tells got thrown out of yeshiva because on Purim they put a big sign over there. There's notion. And they got thrown out of yeshiva. Okay. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. The Yak is also. They don't let you sit in there's certain rooms that you're not allowed to sit.
Unless it's covered in plastic.
Okay.
The Italians are no different. Italians are no different, but they're part of it.
Real wow. And as we spoke yesterday, and the Greeks, they don't even let you come into the front door. You have to go through the back door. Okay. I have a guy across the street from me. He has a chain across his front porch. Can't even go in. Okay, so let's see the Heilige Gemara weiter. So it's a Arsha de Gada. Amalei Rabbanan Leula. Haditnan. We learned a Mishnah. Kishahein Mavra Noisai, when they would bring the Sudas Havora, the first meal after the Levaya, and the Ran says it's either referring to a Kohen Gadol or to a Melech She'ir Le'evel, and it's a Mishnah, it's not a Brisa, but per Kohen Gadol. So when they ran the Sudas Havora, Kolo Alma Suban Al Ha'oretz, everybody would sit on the ground because they're not going to sit higher than the level of the Kohen Gadol or the Melech. Who Mesav Al Dargish? He would sit on the Dargish. So Frank the Gemara, Kula Shata Lo Yosef Allah. All year long, no one sits on that bed, right? It's for the Sar. When he's a double punk, then he should sit on the Sar's place. So this is a kasha. Maskeflo Ravina is a teretz. Usually Maskeflo Ravina is a kasha. But Maskeflo Ravina, if you look at the base of the Tziyonim, umay kusha. Frek Ravina, what's your kasha? Dilma media the hava a boss of a the chulashaita all year long. A kohen and a melech, if they want meat and wine, they may eat. If not, no. Yet on that day, we automatically bring them wine and meat. So that's not a kasha. It's not a kasha. How could they use a dargish if it's normally made not to be used? That's not a problem. Kasha. But if you want to have a kasha on our description of what a dargish is, you can ask this question. The Tanya, dargish, loy haya kaifeyu. The dargish, normally all of the beds were turned over because you weren't supposed to sleep on the bed during Shiva. So, but a dargish that you wouldn't turn over upside down, they would stand it up on its side. The Amit Arsha the Gadahu, if it's in the Arsha the Gada, Latani we learned, Hakoyves mitasai, when someone does Kriyas Hamita, we don't do that anymore, but when people did Kriyas Hamita, Loy mitasai Bolvatu Koifa, Elakol mitos sheyesh loy v'soich habayis ukoy. So if dargish is a bed, why don't you turn it over? Why do you just put it al tidoi? Why are you just zoikvoy? You should turn it over like every other bed, because it's la dafka bed that you sleep on. Zok t'gemar holoi kasha. That's not shver either. Midi to have a amita hamiyuchedes lekelim. It's no difference than a different type of mita that's normally not used to lie on. It's used to put parcels on. It's more like a cabinet. The Tanya we learned, im ha'isa mita hamiyuchedes lekelim. If it was a mita that was designed to just old kelim, it wasn't something that we sleep on, ain't tzarich l'chavoisa. So this dargish, the reason why you don't have to turn it over, you just stand it up, is because it's not normally used to sleep. So that's not a challenge either to our explanation of a dargish being this ceremonial bed. If you want a good raya, that dargish cannot mean this bed that we just have for the sarabayas, this would be a good kasha. The Tanya we learned, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So once again, a dargish is this bed that we're saying is not really used to sleep on, and we have to do something when someone's an oval to make sure the bed cannot be used. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says the best way to deal with it is matir karvitav v'hu noifel me'elav. So there's actually a machlokes how you deal with it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds is the reason why this was different than any other bed is most beds you have the bed frame with the four legs and the bed frame, and then there are ropes that go across both lengthwise and widthwise, which formed what we would call the box spring upon which they put a mattress. But the way a normal bed is constructed is those ropes that create that box spring surface are removable. A dargish was made where all of these straps that go across, or it was more, the box spring was more like a sheet of leather that had the ability to connect to little loops that were put all the way around on the interior of the bed frame. So imagine on the interior of the bed frame, there's a series of loops that are connected to the bed frame, and this flat sheet of leather, which was used as your box spring or even maybe as your mattress, it was connected with a button or whatever it is to each of the loops that went around. So this way, it's easy to disassemble the bed. You just undo the buttons all the way around, and it falls off. So that's what you should do during the shiva. What you do is you open up all of these buttons, which lets that leather surface fall to the floor. If you're learning that a dargish is this type of ceremonial bed, if it's a real bed, it wouldn't have karvitin because it's not a temporary bed; it's a real bed. If you learn that it's like a cot that you move around, yeah, so it has the ability to disassemble it quite easily, and that's why there's like buttons or loops and hooks that hold it all together. But if it's a permanent bed, it's just a bed that's not used by somebody, so it wouldn't even have this type of buckle, this type of connection. So that's a good kasha to prove that a dargish cannot be a full bed. It has to be more like a cot. Yosy Rabban, Omar Shilte Lahumi Rabbanan. I asked this question to someone from the Rabbanan, and V'Rav Bar Marov Shmei, the Havashchiach B'Shuka Detzali. He would hang out in the shuk where the Ma'avdei Oiros, the people who used to tan leather, that this was in this shuk, and V'Amali, and he told me, and he would know because that dargish, that box spring is made out of leather. V'Amali, he would tell me, my dargish Arsho Detzala. It's like a portable bed. Let's see how the Ram describes it. Arsho Detzala, Mita Shal Or. It's a bed that's made out of leather. The Toilen Ritzuos, the Svasa Or Sobit. So you have this flat piece of or, which is, let's say, the box spring, we'll call it, or could be they slept on it itself, and all around it there were straps that came out of it that you would connect to the bed frame that would support it. When they wanted to set up their bed, they would tie these leather straps all the way around to the bed frame, and then when you undid it, the hanging kavita. So you might ask, I was talking about loops that come out of the bed that connect. Here it sounds like the leather directly connects to the bed frame, but we're going to see that it was a little bit more involved in that. Now, normally what you would do is you turn the bed over. A real bed, you turn over. A bed that you sleep in, one's level turn over. But the problem is our beds, for instance, the headboard and the footboard rise above the level of a mattress. So if you turn the whole bed over, assuming that the mattress didn't fall off, the mattress would be suspended above the ground because the headboard and the footboard would raise the level of the mattress. But this cot, imagine you take a cot and you turn it over where there is no headboard and footboard, the mattress would be sitting right on the ground. So if you would just turn this dargish over, the soft leather surface that you normally sleep on is now sitting in the earth, right? Why would that happen? It didn't have a headboard and a footboard. So if you turn it over, it would be sitting, the surface that you would normally sleep on will be right on the earth. Therefore, that's why the Tanakama says you don't turn it over. You stand it up on its side. So you would let it lean either it would stand on its footboard or on its headboard. So it would stand up, but you still wouldn't be able to lie on it. Because if you turned it upside down, like other beds, it would ruin the mattress. But Rabbi Gamliel said, no need to do that. Just leave it upright, undo the straps, and it'll fall down. It's going to touch the earth, but that's the underside. If the underside touches the earth, we're not concerned. That's not the part that you sleep on. We're worried about the other side.
Why by regular bed that's going to happen?
Because the headboard and the footboard come up above the mattress. So when you turn it over, assuming the mattress doesn't fall off, I guess the mattress didn't fall off; it was tied to it, right? So then it would be suspended above the ground. Okay,
The bed frame comes higher than the mattress.
it has a headboard and a footboard. Most beds have a headboard and a footbed. So when you turn it over, the bottom of the head, the top of the headboard now becomes the leg. So it raises it up high. Okay. So that's what. So that was the machlokes between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Rabbanan how to deal with the dargish so that it shouldn't get ruined. So Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says dargish mata gevitu b'noif mel be dargish arsa the gadu karvit me isla. He also Rabban Amar Shilti like Rabbanan b'Rav by Rabbi Shmei that V'shchit Moshe Tzali but my dargish arsa the tzali. Okay, beautiful. Itmar, we had a machlokes. Ezehu mita ve'ezehu dargish. How could you tell the difference between what a permanent bed is and a dargish? Zok the Gemara. Amar B'Yirmiyah, Mita Misargan Oisa Al Gaba. You have these ropes that are going to form the support for your mattress. So how do the ropes adhere to the sideboards and to the head and footboard? You would bring the rope above the sideboard and then wrap it around. It didn't go. There was no hole drilled in the boards. They wrapped it around. Misargan Oisa Al Gaba. You would bring the rope over the top of the bed frame and then wrap it around to hold it. But dargish. There was actually a hole drilled into the side of the bed frame, which the Rambam will explain exactly how they did it. No, we'll see it later. But Mesagin means there was a hole drilled into it, and you put some type of loop into it, and that's what you connected this leather platform to. Meishay Freik the Gemara. Kli eights, a keli that's made out of eights. I'm not mistaken. I'm skipping the two rounds, so I have to go back to the round. Mita masargan al gaba, hachavolim markivin ala rucha samita. The ropes, you bring the ropes that support the mattress, the ropes that run length and width, they're woven together. You wrap it around the bed frame so it comes over the top of them. But dargish masargan megufay. Imagine you have holes drilled into the two sideboards of your bed. So this leather mat had little straps that came out of it all the way around that went into the holes that were drilled into the side of the bed frame. And I guess you would put them through the holes and maybe strap them through, make a knot, make them they couldn't fall out, but you didn't bring them over. And that was the difference. So Zokti Gemara Mesek Kli eights Meimasa Mekabatuma Hamita a bed Varisa, which is like a crib, Misha Yeshufam Boradag. It's when you put the shellac on it. What they would do is instead of buying shellac in Home Depot, they would just hire a shellac to take fish juice. Mishijim Boradag They would use the skin of a fish as sandpaper, and they would sand it down, and that would create the finishing touch. Once you made the finishing touch on the wooden structure, that rendered it a keli to be makabel tuma. The mita mistaregas al gaba. If you learn that on a permanent bed they brought these straps over the top of the boards around the bed, well then why would you need to sand it at all? You're going above them; it's covered over. So I might be wrong in my understanding. If you look at the pictures that the Arshkro brings, he describes the bed like I did, with a series of ropes going lengthwise and widthwise. So I don't understand. Why do you have to sand? Because when you bring the straps or the ropes over the side of the headboard, there's space in between each strap. Maybe you got to sand that part, right? But the Gemara is asking, if you bring the ropes over the sideboards, over the bed frame, then why do you have to sand it down for? So it must be that the entire length of your sideboards must have been covered. Otherwise, you have to sand the areas and smooth them out in between where the ropes go. So that's the only subject I have that I didn't see that the article mentioned. But if you look at the picture, they all learn a bed is just a series of ropes going in perpendicular, two sets of rope that are perpendicular to each other that wrap over the sideboards and the headboards and the footboard. Shasiver, exactly. But the Gemara is asking, if that's how it was constructed, why would I need lamali shivas aradag? Why do I need to sand it down? Because they go over. Ella hava ha migufan. It must be that in fact both beds there's a hole drilled into the sideboards, and we're not bringing the rope over them, and therefore they need to be sanded down. So then, what's the difference between the construction of a bed and a dargish? Mita iule vafuke bebezini. A bed, the straps go in and out, and the Ran explains you take the ropes, you put it through those holes, and maybe you bring it back around, but it's just the ropes going directly through the holes. But dargish so the bed that we're talking about, that you could take apart like a cot, you had lulois tluyin benikve aruchaysa. What was permanent were loops that were embedded, connected to the sideboards, the headboard and the footboard. Uvahen machnisin rashay ritzuyos hatluyos bisvasa or. So I imagine a series of buckles that are installed all the way around the sideboards, the headboard and footboard that are connected there through holes drilled in them. And then you had all these straps that came out of this piece of leather that you connected to those buckles, and that's what held it together. And when you were ready to move on, you just took it apart and you folded it up, and away you went.
There's some of these springs that goes in. So
Yeah, exactly. Except it wasn't springs; it was just buckles. Amr Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha Amr Rabbi Mita Shinachlitel Yoitzin. What happens? We know you have to turn beds over, and we discussed. The Chachamim said you don't want to turn over a dargish because the leather is going to touch the ground. So now the Gemara is discussing the other beds you can't turn over either. You have a bed that's a canopy bed, but here it's not talking about a canopy bed. It's talking about a bed that only had two posts. You had one large post that came up in the center of the headboard, and then one large post that went up in the center of the footboard. They would put the post across, they would put a shemata over it, and it formed like a tent structure over the bed. So if you had a mita, shenachlitea, yoitzin, how are you supposed to turn that over? If you turn it over, you're going to bust those two poles that are coming up. So therefore, zoikfa, you just stand it up either on the headboard or on the footboard, vidaya, it would be enough. Amar B'Yakov bar Idi, Amar B'Yishuv ben Levi, halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, that you don't have to zoikiv to bed, you just undo the buckle, and then the piece of leather goes down. So the maskana of our Gemara is that a dargish is like a cot that can be disassembled and reassembled, and whether or not. I'm sorry. No, the Veil is not sleeping in the beds. Today we wouldn't sleep at all. How can you sleep on the bed? I couldn't sleep on the floor. Okay. What do we do on Tisha B'Av? We sleep with instead of two pillows, you use one pillow. So that's why before Tisha B'Av, a couple of weeks before, I start sleeping with three pillows. So that they go with one pillow. Okay. You know, my wife claims just because I have to keep Tisha B'Av, why should she lose sleep a whole night? That I have to snore because I don't have enough pillows. Right? Okay. So Halacha L'Maaseh, Reb Meir holds that if you say mita, you ask yourself to have enough mita, it doesn't include a dark. Zok Tehillah Gemara Vayter. Hanoidim min ha'ir. What if someone says it's also for me to have enough from this city?
It's not to my couch.
Mutter likanes l'tchuma shalir. You're allowed to go into the tchum of the city. That's not called like you're in the city. But v'asher likanes li'ibura. Ibura is a little bit closer perimeter. We'll soon see. Means within 70 amos. But if someone says I will not have enough of my house, what's called inside the house versus outside the house? When the door is closed, even if you're standing underneath the doorpost, but you're outside the door, that's not called in the house. So it's only usher if you're if you're on the inside of the door, if the door is closed. If the door is open, I mean, it's the same place. But the way you figure out what the line is, you close the door. Anything on the inside of the door is inside. Anything on the outside of the door is outside.
Even if it's a wide.
Even if it's wide. What? Correct. We know Jewish is irregular, isn't it? Yeah. Minovan di bura de masa kamasadam. How do you know that if you're in that close range of 70 amos within the city, how do you know that's called being in the city? This was one of the most beautiful stories. It was the night before they were going to fight Yericho, and a malach came and met with Yeshua. I believe we named this in the Haftarah on Pesach. Vayar v'nei ish oimed lenegdoi. There was a man standing keneged Yeshua. The charba shlufa b'yadoi. He had a sword stretched out in his hand. Vayelech Yeshua elov. Yeshua went with him and confronted him. Vayomer halanu, are you one of us, or ata, or imlutarenu? And I want to get into a beautiful shot from the Palav Cherov on this pasuk, but first we have to finish the Gemara. So my Yerichai, Mamish, was Yeshua really in the city of Yerichai? Of course not. They were trying to capture Yerichai. It was fortified and sealed. There's no way he got inside. He was within 70 amas. He was in the area around it. And the Novi refers to that as being in Yerichai. That's how you know being in the Ibura is like being in the city. Maybe even being in the Tchum of a city is like you're inside the city. So the Gemara that you can't say. When the pasuk talks about Tchum, it says measure michutz la'ir to find the Tchum. So the Torah defines Tchum as chutz la'ir. But even though you're under the doorpost, it could be a very thick doorpost. As long as you're outside from where the door would close, you're telling me that that's not included inside the house. Masiv Rav Murray. It says v'yotza kohen min habayis. This is talking about when the kohen comes to visit, the initial visit when he's looking at a bayis hamanuga, and it says he leaves the house, and then he locks it up. V'yotza kohen min habayis al pesach habayis v'hiskers habayis shivus yomim. So the Gemara tells us yochol yelech lebeisoi v'yasker. Maybe the kohen has to go to his house, and from his house he has to close the front door of the house of the bayis hamanuga. He'll have to take a very long rope with him, so that when he gets into his house, he can tug on the rope. Talmud Leimer, that's not what it means. It says al pesach habayis. He just goes to the door of the house that's infected. Al pesach habayis yochol liyamid tachas hamashkoy v'yasker. Maybe he can actually still be standing within the area of the doorpost and pull the door closed from the outside. Talmud Leimer min habayis at sheyetze min habayis kuloi. He has to be totally out of the house. What's totally out of the house? He has to be outside of the mashkoif, the yaskir, and then he could close the door from that position. Uminayin. So you see that he's not allowed to be under the mashkoif at all. That's the Gemara's kasha, because we're saying you could still be in the mashkoif and you're still considered outside of the house. But the brayso goes on. Uminayin shim halach leveso v'hisker. What if he didn't follow instructions and he went all the way to his house and he pulled the rope to close the door? The hisker, or he was underneath the mashkoif when he closed the door. How do you know sheskeri mustar that it's still a good hesker and it works to count the 7 days? Talmud Leimer hisker sabayis mikol makoyim. But I'll call upon him. You see very clearly by the negoyim that the kohen's not supposed to be underneath the mashkoif. He's got to be out of the house. So by Nedarim, that area as well should be considered in the house and it should be aser. So tomorrow shiny gabi bayis dichsev min habayis achiyetze min habayis kuloi. So technically, being under the mashkoif, as long as you're outside where the door closes, that's not called being in the house, and therefore for a neder it's not a problem. By nega, since it says minabayis, you have to be even further out than that, and that's why you can't even be under the mashkoif. So everyone, I don't know if everyone knows this, but there's a famous Palav Cherov on this beautiful pasuk. It says that Yeshua was confronted by the Malach. Imagine it's the night before the battle of Yerichai. Everyone's stressed. Everyone's worried about the war. And a Malach confronts Yeshua. And Yeshua knew that the Malach clearly, if it's Chavish Shlufa B'Yoda, he means he's coming for trouble. And he knew clearly that there was a message from the Rebbeinu Shalom that he did an aver that he had to fix. So he asked the Malach, Halonu ata imlutarenu. And Tosfos tells us that Halonu means, or the Gemara tells us actually, that Halonu means, are you coming to mon me for the aver of B'Tul Torah, which is being over Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe, or Rosh Kilas Yaakov, or Yimlutarenu, are you coming to mon us that we were Mavatal Karbonis today, because and Karbonis are Megin Aleinu Mitzarenu, they protect us from our Tzoros, Tosfos says. So what did the Malach answer? Kiani loy, said loy, no Yeshua, Kani Sar Tzava Hashem, I'm a Sar of the Rebbeinu Shalom, Atabasim. And the sense of Ata Kisu Lochemes Hashira Zoy Sima B'Piyam, referring to B'Tul Torah. So right after that, a couple of psukim later, it says V'Yolon Yeshuv B'Soich Emek. They learned because Umkosh Halacha, they had of it a whole night. Correct upon the B'Shirav. If I ask you a question, is it A or B, and the answer is B, would you tell me no, it's C? No, tell me he's B. So why didn't the Malach just answer, Lanu? I'm Lanu, right? Why do you have to say, no, you're making a mistake? What's the mistake? Zok, I don't know. Dr. Panavitrov, I'm worried to convert. There's two Mechayiv to learn Torah. There's Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe Moirasha Chila Shakli. It's our heritage. It's a mitzvah. If that was the case, Yeshua is 100% right. But Oisik b'mitzvah, patim in a mitzvah. They're in the middle of preparing for Mechamas Mechama. That's a real serious Oisik b'mitzvah. So you're potter. You're potter from Karbonis. You're potter from learning because it's Oisik b'mitzvah, patim in a mitzvah. But Yeshua was told by the Malach, Loi, you're making a mistake. You think the only Mechayiv to learn Torah is because it's a mitzvah? It's my Rosh Hashanah. If that was the case, you'd be right. But Loi, Kanis Ha'achiv Hashem Atabasi, Ba'ata Kisu Lechem Es Hashira. Torah, learning Torah is like a shira, which is the very purpose of our creation. The very purpose of our creation, that you can't give up, even if you're oisik b'mitzvah. A yid without Torah, like Rabbi Kiva said, is like a fish without water. So, yes, Yeshua, you're right about the fact that if it was just a mitzvah, oisik b'mitzvah, pater mitzvah. But you're wrong, Yeshua, that you think that's the only mechayat to learn Torah, and that's why you're pater here. But no, Torah has to be learned no matter what, no matter when. That was his timing. And that's why right away Yeshua did tshuva, and he right away learned Torah, and in fact, they won the war. And we should all win all our wars. Okay, have a wonderful day.
Okay. The halucha that by Kohen is because it can't be it should be under the roof. It's going to become tumor. So the tumor is bottom. So he has to go out.
Well, tumas oil. He wouldn't if there was a mace in the house. He wouldn't be tumas oil because he's out of the oil. The door's closed.